Dr. Corrado, this is Mason Bird at DFS. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just want to let you know it is 10:30 and we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to call to order the Scientific Advisory Committee meeting. I would like to thank everyone, both the committee members as well as the staff of the DFS for being here today. A few things before we get started. The first is I would like to remind the subcommittee members to please keep your cameras on, as Virginia statute requires that for public meetings. Also, please mute your sound unless you're speaking. And when you do speak, please speak clearly and loudly so everyone can hear. Before we get started with the meeting, we have a new member, so I thought it would be good to go around and introduce ourselves. So I will start, and then I will call on our committee members to introduce themselves. So my name is Kathleen Corrado. I currently am Executive Director of the Forensic Science Program at Syracuse University. Prior to that, I was Laboratory Director for about 22 years at the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences. I'm currently the chair of the Scientific Advisory Committee, and I serve also as a member of the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors. Going down the list of members, I will ask Mr. Beatty to introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Randall Beatty. I occupy the seat for the International Association for Chemical Testing. I recently retired from the Texas Department of Public Safety, where I worked a little over 36 years in the Crime Laboratory Division.
Thank you. Mr. Bomarito? Sorry, we can't hear you.
About that. My name is Chris Bomarito. I am the trace evidence expert for this scientific area committee. I have about 36 years in forensic science, which is kind of scary to hear myself say. And I've worked with both Michigan State Police, DEA, and my own private accredited forensic laboratory.
Thank you. Mr. DeMuth?
Morning, this is Bill DeMuth. I'm the Laboratory Director for the Training and Applications Laboratory for the Illinois State Police Forensic Sciences Command. And I'm serving in the capacity of a board member for the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners.
Thank you. Ms. Forey?
Morning, my name is Erin Forey. I'm a research forensic scientist at RTI International Center for Forensic Science Advancement and Application. I serve as the quality assurance management person on the SAC. Prior to being at RTI, I was the quality manager for Boston Police Department for 12 years. And prior to that, I worked in forensic biology for the San Diego Sheriff's Department.
Right. Director Jackson?
Yes, good morning. I'm Linda Jackson. I'm the director of the Department of Forensic Science here in Virginia. So I sit on this committee as having that position. My background is in seized drugs, and so that started doing that quite a few years ago, and moved from that to being a program manager where I was over seized drugs, toxicology, and trace evidence before becoming the director. And I've been the director for about 10 years. And thank you so much for your willingness to serve on this body. Thanks.
Dr. LeBeau?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark LeBeau. I'm a senior forensic toxicologist at the FBI laboratory. I serve in the role for the scientific area committee or advisory committee, as the board certified toxicologist. And I'm also serving as the toxicology subcommittee chair.
Thank you. Dr. Maha?
I'm George Maha, and up until September 30th, I was employed. I'm now retired after 36 years. I worked for LabCorp. I was a lab director over DNA identification, histocompatibility lab, and consumer genetics. And I'm still active on other scientific committees, specifically the College of American Pathologists and the committees for the Association for the Advancement for Blood and Biotherapies.
Thank you. Mr. Myers.
Good morning. My name is Rich Myers. I'm a forensic chemist with associate lab director with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I represent forensic chemists from the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Thank you. Ms. Bro.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Bro. I'm actually the director at Montgomery County Police Crime Laboratory in Maryland. I served in a forensic biology role for about 25 years of my career, so I'm more new to the director seat, and I'm actually sitting in the biology seat for the Scientific Advisory Committee. And I'm new, so.
Welcome. Dr. Vallone.
Hey, I'm Pete Vallone. I work at the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. I'm the leader of the Applied Genetics Group there. We work in the area of forensic genetics and producing research products and reference materials. And I serve in my capacity here on the forensic biology, and I'm the co-chair with Kathy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And is Mr. Zersi here? I'm not sure.
He is not, Dr. Corrado.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you and welcome again, everyone. It's good to see everybody. The first order of business will be adoption of the agenda of the meeting. Members should have received a copy of the agenda from Elise Strobel. And I would ask if anyone has any suggested changes to the agenda, and if not, if there's a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda. Mark Lubo.
I second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Hi.
All opposed or any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the agenda has been adopted. The next item on the agenda is approval of the draft minutes from the last meeting on April 11th of 2023. Again, Ms. Strobel previously sent a link to the draft minutes. I would ask if the members have had a chance to read those minutes, if there are any proposed changes to the minutes. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the draft minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the meeting minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is a chair's report. I do not have a report today other than to thank previous chair Kristen Schelling. She did a great job, and we're sorry that she's not with us on the committee anymore, but I don't have any other report. The next item on the agenda is a report from the review committee. This happens to be the committee that I am also a subcommittee that I am chair of. So I will provide a review of that meeting. This was the review committee that met virtually yesterday, October 10th at 10 a.m. The department, this committee was put together because the Department of Forensic Science had been monitoring a podcast entitled Admissible Shreds of Evidence that ran earlier this year and was produced by Virginia Public Medium and Story Mechanics. Over the course of its 12 episodes, the podcast detailed some allegations regarding Mary Jane Burton, a former serologist with the department, then known as the Bureau, and other former employees of the department. Under Virginia Code 9.1-113C, Director Jackson has the authority to request that the Scientific Advisory Committee review matters where there has been an allegation of misidentification or other testing error made by the department. Director Jackson made such a request, and I appointed 4 other SAC members to serve on this subcommittee in addition to myself. Those members are Dr. Maha, Dr. Vallone, Ms. Forey, and Ms. Bro. At the meeting yesterday, the subcommittee heard an overview of the podcast and the allegations contained therein, and a report from a now retired DFS forensic scientist who previously was a serologist, then forensic biology examiner with the DFS. His report focused on the prior procedures for serology testing and changes made to enhance those procedures since its inception. Also, he discussed the different requirements for documentation from the 1970s and today, and how the typing results were reported on the worksheets and logbooks used by Ms. Burton and other staff during that time. VPN and Story Mechanics representatives were present to provide comment and offer assistance to the subcommittee. Subcommittee members asked DFS staff to prepare a list of allegations for their use in reviewing the documents provided by VPM and the corresponding case file documentation provided by DFS. Given the large volume of information provided for the review, the subcommittee agreed to meet again in person on January 9th, 2024 to further discuss the allegations and the review of case file materials. So that is my report from the subcommittee. Are there any questions from anyone regarding that report? No. I would then ask for a motion to approve the subcommittee meeting report.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed or any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the subcommittee report has been approved. Next item on the agenda is a report from the toxicology subcommittee, and I will call on Dr. LeBeau, the subcommittee chair, to provide a report of the October 11th, 2023 meeting.
All right, thank you. The subcommittee met earlier this morning, October 11th at 9 a.m. and reviewed a number of plans and validation packets that were provided. There were 5 in total. We had some discussion about possible ways to further improve the information that's obtained within the validation studies and how to author validation plans. We did make some recommendations for consideration in regards to a particular validation summary on a method to screen and confirm xylazine by acid, base, and neutral drug screen. But other than that, that's essentially the work that was reviewed was of high quality, and the subcommittee was happy with what they saw.
Thank you for that report. Are there any questions for Dr. LeBeau? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the toxicology subcommittee report.
So made.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the toxicology subcommittee report has been approved. Next on the agenda, we're going to move to Director Jackson to provide her director's report.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my slides and I'm going to turn my camera off while I'm talking because my computer has frozen up twice so far and I'm worried. So I'm going to try and use as little bandwidth as possible. All right. So if somebody could confirm if you can see the slides. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this is my normal report to kind of update everybody on what's going on in the department. Our biggest project right now is definitely our central laboratory capital project, as we are kind of moving along in the process of building a new facility for our central laboratory, our statewide offices, the medical examiners central district, and their statewide offices out in Hanover County. This is a link to where you can always check on progress if you are interested, and we are still on time and within budget to finish by the fourth quarter of 2025. So it's a 3-year build from when we started at the beginning of 2023. And so we definitely have been moving along. This is one of the photos from the Skanska website, who's our general contractor. And we have completed a lot of the work where they've been doing the site prep for all of the water removal from the site and all of that, as well as putting underneath the facility all of the different stuff that needs to go underneath the water and sewage piping, the big conduits for electricity, for other types of wiring that needs to be throughout the building. And they've started now putting up steel, so that's exciting. This is the most recent photograph that Dr. Barron had provided. And I tried to put the picture kind of along with the rendering, so you could sort of see how it's going to end up, where although the top picture is a little bit tilted to the left, you can see that, you know, where the two big parts of the building are coming together. So we did celebrate Forensic Science Week. That was nationally celebrated September 17th through the 24th. And we were pleased to do several things during that week. We did have our service awards ceremonies at all 4 of our labs, and we do those kind of via WebEx as well, so that we're all together, even though we're in 4 different locations. And we gave out 54 service awards to staff members, you know, serving from 5 years up to, we have 1 staff member who received an award for serving 40 years for the department. We also had a leadership retreat in Stanton, Virginia, which is kind of in the middle of the state, which allowed people from all the different laboratories coming together. And it's the first time that supervisors, managers, all levels of leadership were able to come together since the beginning of the pandemic. And so it was really great to provide that opportunity for people to collaborate and kind of get to know each other. It's hard sometimes when you have a laboratory that is working in different locations, trying to keep everybody sort of on the same page and trying to work towards the same goals. And so it's good that we got everyone together. For the second day and a half, we actually brought in Dean Gialamas, who many of you probably know. He was the laboratory director for the LA County Sheriffs, as well as leadership positions at Orange County in California, prior to becoming a high performance coach, and so leadership coach. And so he provided training on leadership skills, on difficult conversations, courageous conversations, and mentoring and succession planning. So it was some really good content. We also had a proclamation from Governor Youngkin, and while we were at the leadership retreat, our new Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security was able to come and present that proclamation and spend a little time eating lunch with staff and meeting people and hearing stories about things that they're doing. And so that was nice of him to provide us that amount of time. We've also been we're kind of in the middle of providing our DNA training for attorneys and judges. So the 2 dates in black have already happened, and the 2 in blue are happening in the next couple of weeks. And this is training where we are providing scientific training to attorneys, and it's the training is done all together with judges, prosecutors, public and private defense attorneys all together. And it's gone very well, trying to give some hands-on exercises and trying to make it more understandable what our reports say, and different strengths and limitations of the testing, and really how the testing works and what it all means. And we've gotten some very good feedback from the first 2. So this is similar to the drug training that was done earlier this year. The drug training was a half day, whereas the DNA training is pretty much a full day. We do have 2 new laboratory directors in our Eastern and Northern laboratories, and so I just wanted to introduce them if people are not familiar with these folks. So our Eastern laboratory in Norfolk, Susan Stanitsky had been the laboratory director there for quite a number of years, and she retired. And Dave Copenhaver had been a drug chemist there for years, and had been the lab director in Northern for about a year. And he transferred down to become the laboratory director of our Eastern lab. And then Joshua Kruger, who's been the trace evidence supervisor in the Central Lab for 22 years, was promoted to the lab director in Northern. And I think he has really been enjoying getting his feet wet in something different. So I just wanted to introduce them, and that's their contact information in case you need anything laboratory specific. One thing that we have been working on, we worked on this several years ago and came to a halt. And then with the help of the Office of Data Governance and Analytics within the Commonwealth of Virginia, have kind of retaken up working on putting together a public dashboard so that people can look at our case statistics more interactively and more transparently. And so this is a draft of the dashboard that is in creation. It is not a finalized product. We have a couple of things that we want to change and work on. But basically, you'll be able to select the different time periods and see the average turnaround times of cases that were completed in that time period, and look at case submissions from that time period so that you can kind of compare workloads and that kind of thing. We also are going to try and create, have them create some internal dashboards that have a little more information, but those are kind of in the second phase of what we will be working on. So eventually this will be available from our website, and it's using data from Forensic Advantage, which is our LIMS system, and we did look at Michigan State Police also uses the Forensic Advantage LIMS program, and they have used Power BI, which is what this is using, to do something similar to this. And so we kind of use that as an inspiration. One other thing that we have been sharing our data for use in Virginia, we're sharing our aggregated seized drug data to something called the Framework for Addiction Analysis and Community Transformation, or FACT. They have recently put together a public-facing website called Curb the Crisis, trying to give more information about opioid overdoses, fentanyl overdoses. And so our data has been aggregated and shared with this, and I put the website on there in case you're interested. It also, if you can see, kind of in the middle of the graphic, there are tabs for overdose deaths, opioid arrests, and emergency room services substance use requests. So you can, there's several different levels and sources of data that are shown so that you can see trends across across the Commonwealth. And this data for our data is kind of aggregated for cases that either had opioids or didn't have opioids. So it's made it so that it's easy to share because there's nothing identifying about that information. We've sent out a couple of agency notices to our customers. One in June we sent after we were notified of the programming error in the FBI Next Gen Identification, or NGI, system for palm print searches. Basically, palm prints that were entered in the system were not being automatically searched against the newly added palm prints, even though we had thought they would be and had told our customers that they would be in the language on the report. And so we've had to kind of relaunch those so that they would start doing that automatic searching again. And so I don't think that there's been any negative impact to this, but we wanted to let everyone know that this was happening. We also notified our customers that that the extracts that had been dried down as part of the post-conviction project, which started years and years ago, and those extracts had been what was used for the DNA testing in the post-conviction project. We have kept those frozen for many years so that we would make sure that if they did need to be tested again, that they had been handled appropriately. But the project has now been officially closed, and we wanted to treat that evidentiary material the same as we treat all other evidential material, which means that we need to send it back to the submitting agency. So we are going through the process of drying down those samples so that they can be safely stored at room temperature. And we're doing this by agency so that we can just send them one batch of samples so that they don't have to be inundated with a whole bunch of different samples and at different times and try and figure out what to do with them. And we sent out a notice letting them know to expect these samples and why we were doing that. And we've begun sending those back. Also, we wanted to, truthfully, we wanted to make sure that we were going to have that done too before we need to move, so that we can do it so that they're all handled the same way before we would have to move to the new lab. One update for toxicology, we have over the last couple of years had an MOU with the medical examiner's office, which allows them to submit certain overdose cases to a private laboratory, and that we pay for that testing. And we have had that in place using funding that's in our base budget, which was originally given to us to handle outsourcing for seized drug cases when our backlog was very high in that area. We are using that money now for this outsourcing of tox cases as we continue to increase our testing capacity, making sure that the medical examiner is able to meet their turnaround time needs for their accreditation. So we have renewed that MOU, although we are starting to reduce the use and need for this testing as we are getting folks trained. So currently we're using it just in our Eastern lab and our Western OCME districts. With our Eastern lab, we now have 3 forensic toxicologists who will be there and be fully trained. And so we're finally going to transition the last jurisdictions. Just as a little piece of history, originally all driving under the influence toxicology testing was done in the Richmond laboratory. And it was done that way just for economy of scale, handling all of those the same way, made it so that you could be more efficient. But then after the Melendez-Diaz decision in 2009, when it became necessary for people to have to travel to court on a regular basis to support the work that was done, it became less justifiable to have every test done in Richmond to where people would then have to drive hours and hours away to some of the further jurisdictions. And so we began transitioning jurisdictions to the regional laboratories after that fact. And these are the last jurisdictions that are being moved from Central, and these are going to the Eastern Lab, and they're on kind of the peninsula of our eastern part of our state, where you don't have to go through the tunnel to get to the far east. So anyway, it's kind of like an end of an era project. All right, just to go through our case statistics briefly, these are our workload statistics looking at fiscal year 22 versus fiscal year 23. In Virginia, the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30. So fiscal year 23 started July 1st of 22 and ended June 30 of 23. And so just looking at the case submissions, if you can see that they're all red, meaning that they're all higher. So we did see an increase in every section. And unfortunately, that meant that most of the backlogs went up. The only reason that the backlog went down in firearms is due to the large decrease in cases the year before, as several jurisdictions were bringing on their own NIBIN systems. So we were getting less NIBIN only requests. You will see that in drugs, we've had several years of very low submissions in comparison to pre-pandemic. And so fiscal year 23, they have come up, but they are still not at the level from before the pandemic. So then there's this information for each of the sections. And so cases received, these and cases completed, those are the number of cases either received or completed in that quarter. The caseload is the caseload or cases that are available to be worked or the backlog at the end of the quarter on that last day. And then the green line with those numbers are the average number of days that the cases that were worked during that period, how long they took from when they were submitted until when the report was released. So obviously, even though our submissions have gone up a little in controlled substances, we are still able to keep up with those and are maintaining our average turnaround times of less than 30 days. For digital and multimedia evidence, we'll hear a little more about all of these, from the program managers as they speak about the section, but we are 2 people down. And so we have really been seeing how that has negatively affected our capacity. With firearms, we have a bunch of folks now in training, and so we're looking forward to building capacity in that area. Although, as everyone I think understands, that when you hire someone in firearms analysis, the training period is significantly long, and so there's definitely not an immediate fix once you hire someone, as they have to go through that training program. Forensic biology, this is an area that we have been requesting funding and extra positions for, because we have seen significant increases in submissions over the past since 2017. I think 2016, FY16 was the last time we received new additional positions for forensic biology, and the case requests have just continued to increase, particularly in our Western and Northern laboratories, where they have actually both increased more than 60% since 2017. Latents and impressions, they have actually been fairly steady for the past several years, although for the last 2 quarters, they have been receiving more cases than they have been completing, which obviously then makes the backlog go up a little bit. Toxicology, we've talked about how we've been doing the outsourcing. So none of these statistics include any of those cases that were sent by the medical examiner to be tested by the private lab, since they wouldn't have come to us. And trace evidence, Robin is going to talk about this a little bit. We've got some folks in training and had a little bit of turnover and are kind of working through that. Also wanted to include our court statistics from fiscal year 23. I think it's kind of interesting to see the difference in how many subpoenas are received versus how many times people had to appear versus how many times they had to testify, and what that meant for time out of the laboratory. And so, you know, toxicology and controlled substances, they get the most subpoenas. Toxicology actually has to go the most often, but they are the least in the percentage where they actually have to provide testimony when they have showed up in court. So with the time out of the laboratory, we do track that, and we encourage the use of video testimony when that's possible, but there are limitations to that with the different confrontation clause considerations and how that is in the Code of Virginia. Basically, everybody has to agree to allow for the video testimony to be used. For budget, we did have over $2 million left in our general fund at the end of fiscal year 23. There were several reasons for that. There were some scientific equipment that we purchased kind of earlier in the year, and it either had not been received or had not been installed to where we could pay for it before the end of the fiscal year. And so that $646,000 has been obligated already, but we were not able to pay that before the end of the fiscal year. The outsourcing funding, we actually have in our base budget $750,000. No, yeah, $750,000. And we used just under 500,000 of that on the outsourcing that we did in toxicology in fiscal year 23. So that left the balance there from that outsourcing funding bucket. And then the last reason was for turnover and vacancy. We did have some normal turnover and vacancy, but then we also had the 5 positions for controlled substances that we held open purposefully because we know historically that the drug submissions will go back up again, but we didn't want to have folks just sitting there not having anything to do. So when people had left through attrition, we had held those open with the understanding that as submissions kind of increased, we would go ahead and start to fill those. And so we have actually now, there's two of those that we have worked on filling. There's certainly been a big push from our secretary to increase the drug enforcement throughout the Commonwealth, and we want to be able to respond to that appropriately. And then the last was just positions that had been given to us new in fiscal year 23 that it took us longer to fill than we anticipated. And so 2 of those are toxicologist positions in our Eastern, which is now been moved to Central, but in our Western and Eastern labs. So for anybody that didn't follow what was going on with the budget in Virginia, the Virginia budget is a 2-year budget, and every other year it can be amended. And normally that happens as a matter of course during the General Assembly session. This year there was not an agreement until much later, and it wasn't until after the fiscal year started that an amended budget was passed and signed into law. So our budget was amended for this fiscal year that we're already in to increase our funding in several areas and add a couple of positions. And so what we received is 4 FTEs. One is to add a full-time technician in our evidence receiving section in Western. One is to add 2 biologist level positions, forensic scientist biologists, into our forensic biology section, and Brad is going to explain what we're going to do with those. One was to cover our PERT coordinator. That's our PERT tracking system coordinator that works with the customers that are using that system, and to take that position and move it off of the SACI grant and put it onto general funds. And the last was one that we didn't actually request, but was given to us to provide an FLS or a laboratory specialist that would be under Becky Wagner in the chemistry research section that could work on either toxicology or seized drugs methods to be able to respond to changes in legislation that had to do with marijuana and THC. So there were a couple things that we had asked for that were not included. For those biologist positions, we had asked for 4, and we were only given 2. So that's something that we do still have a need for. And we had also asked for funding to cover the subscription fees for different Cellbrite type tools because they've changed to a different funding mechanism of how we pay for those, and the fees have gone up significantly in the last several years. It used to be that those types of things were about $10,000, and now it's well over $100,000. So that was all the information that I was going to share. I know it did say also on the agenda that I was going to speak to grants, but there are several slides in the DTS updates that are going to talk about some of the grants that we have received and how we're going to move forward with those. So let me unshare, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Director Jackson. Does anyone have any questions? I would just say I'm excited to looking forward to the dashboard with your statistics. I think that's going to be really nice for people to see.
Great. It has definitely been a project, but now it does seem like there's some people that are very excited about Power BI that are putting their heads on it now, and seems like this is gonna work this time.
That's good. That's great. Any questions for the director? Thank you. That was really a comprehensive report. We appreciate it. Next on the agenda will be to hear from the different supervisors from the Division of Technical Services updates. And I think the first person we'll hear from is Ms. Alka Lohman.
So I'm actually, Alka has a couple of slides that she was going to do, and she has had a family emergency that she is not able to present. I think she's listening, but isn't able to present. And so I'm going to do the first 4 slides for her and then hand it over to some other technical services folks for the rest.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, this is, I'm speaking for Alka Lohman. She's our quality manager and the director of technical services. So next slide. So for our accreditation, just kind of an update. We did complete our surveillance document review back in May of 2023 and had no issues. And we have an on-site, that was just the document review that was off-site, but we do have an on-site surveillance visit that is currently scheduled for the week of May 20th in 2024. Our lead assessor has been assigned, and so that is all kind of moving along. It's great to have that planned so far in advance. And if anyone is interested, our certificates of accreditation and the scopes that explain what testing we do under those certificates are available on our website. And we are kind of cruising through our cycle, which currently expires in 2026. Next slide. So ALCA actually has done a great job over the past couple of months, increasing everybody's thoughts about quality in general and our quality management system. She basically went on a quality tour where she went to each of our laboratories and provided 2 different presentations, one to the supervisors and lab director in each lab, and the other to all staff. And in doing that, she also kind of not only talked about our, what we currently do, but also talked about forming a quality team, affectionately known as the Qualiteam, that people from different labs that are in non-supervisory roles could be a member of and help try and look at quality issues as they are happening, grow people that are interested in quality, and just have some different eyes on different things. And she was happy to see that there were actually quite a few people that were interested in serving on such a team. And so she's tried to put it together with, folks from representing, the different sections and the different labs. And so looking forward to seeing the work that can be done with that. Along with the podcast stuff that Dr. Corrado spoke about in her review subcommittee report, there were also a few questions from that podcast that had come from forensic science board members or other folks in Virginia. And so we wanted to make it clear what we do have in place now that was not necessarily in place in the 70s and 80s prior to us being accredited. So ALCA did provide to the Forensic Science Board at their July meeting a presentation that was an overview of our quality system, and there is it's on our website if anyone is interested in looking at that presentation. Next slide. Our forensic training section, they are the folks that provide training to law enforcement on our laboratory capabilities, as well as the preservation and collection of evidence. Their 9-week course, that is the Forensic Science Academy, the 109th session graduated in June, and the new 110th session has begun. And they will graduate in November, and we're happy that the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security has agreed to be the graduation speaker. During the time in between those courses, the section did provide 6 short courses in July and August, and the great thing about those is that they do provide those in some of the other areas of the state so that law enforcement can attend without having to drive all the way to Richmond. And they also had the Forensic Science Academy Alumni Association. So all the members that have gone through any of those 109 sessions of the Forensic Science Academy can join this Alumni Association. And they have an annual seminar where they are kind of relearning or learning about new techniques and sharing information with each other. So, and that has gone well as well. Next slide. And then my last slide is just to note that we currently have DFS representatives on 7 OSACs. Well, I guess it's really 6 OSACs because subcommittees, because we have 2 members on the Ignitable Liquid Explosives and Gunshot Residue Subcommittee. Brenda Christie from our Eastern Lab is the chair of that subcommittee, and her background is in ignitable liquids, whereas Mary Keehan, she is in our trace section here in Central, and her background is gunshot residue. Our newest member is Corey Bartow, who has just been invited to be a member of the Footwear and Tire Subcommittee, and so that's great. And you will hear next from Rebecca Wagner, who is the subcommittee vice chair of the Forensic Toxicology Subcommittee under Dr. LeBeau, who is also here. So I will pass now along to Becky. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to give an update on the chemistry research section. One grant that we have had for a few years now is the cannabinoid testing grant for toxicology. We did receive a one-year extension, and that extension is going to be ending December 2023. We just presented to the toxicology subcommittee this morning on the validation summary for the quantitative method that has also been incorporated into our procedures manual. We are currently working on a qualitative validation that is going to include several of the tetrahydrocannabinol isomers. I'm excited to announce that we have actually received 2 NIJ research grants this go around. The first one that we received is to develop a workflow for psychedelics, psilocybin, psilocin, and its metabolites within forensic toxicology. This will be screening and confirmation using time of flight, mass spectrometry, and then LC-MS-MS for quantitation. Within this grant, we also include a stability evaluation, including long-term storage stability of the samples. The second grant that we received was the Headspace ethanol analysis or volatiles analysis to accommodate the modern day scenarios in which we're currently facing. One of those, as most of you know, is the conservation of helium. So we're going to be investigating hydrogen and nitrogen as a new carrier gas. And then also a reevaluation of the optimization of sample preparation, including the dilution ratios, vial size, and equilibration temperature and time. So to give a bit of an update on our current staffing, both of those grants that I just mentioned include a forensic laboratory specialist position each, which is not included on this slide. And then Director Jackson also mentioned the marijuana position that we will also be hiring for shortly. But currently we have 3 full-time forensic laboratory specialists, 6s. One is on the Overdose to Action, which is the OD2AS funding that is for 5 years that we just received. And then we also have 1 full-time forensic laboratory specialist 3 that is also on the OD2AS grant. In recruit right now, we do have 1 additional FLS 6 position on the OD2AS grant as well. So that will drastically increase our staff and capacity in a very quick time frame. That is all I have. If anyone has any questions. Great, thank you.
All right, good morning. I'm Robin Weimer. I'm going to give you an update about the chemistry program. So talking about trace evidence and controlled substances. And we're going to start with the trainee update and trace evidence. We have 1 trainee that completed primer residue training in July of 2023. We have another trainee that's almost done with tape training. We just have supervised casework that remains. So we're very close with getting her done, and we'll be very excited to have that complete. Since you last saw me in April, we have lost 2 examiners from trace evidence, 1 to retirement and 1 to promotion. So we've hired 2 new people and are going to be taking the next several years in order to get back to the capacity with all of our subdisciplines that we had prior to their departure. So we have 2 trainees in hair at the moment, with expected completion in the first quarter of 2024. And we have 2 trainees in glass. We're expecting their completion in the second and third quarters of 2024. We have in controlled substances, 2 laboratories with positions in recruit. That's in the central laboratory and the northern laboratory. And we have 2 trainees, 1 in the western laboratory expected to complete training in April of 2024, and 1 in the eastern laboratory expected to complete training in March of 2024. For training and trace evidence, as you just heard a second ago, we have micro XRF. And we're expecting training, a 2-day training from Bruker, the manufacturer, in November. And we've planned a 3-day training from Troy Ernst from Michigan State Police in December. And that's going to be for our 2 current class examiners and our 2 trainees. We will also be having a meeting teach back. We recently sent 2 examiners to the Midwestern Association of Forensic Scientists meeting in Detroit. And we're going to be having a gathering of all of the examiners to share that information that they learned with everyone else. And that's anticipated at the end of this month. Controlled substances, we're going to be having a statewide section meeting next week that we're very excited about. We have 3 different workshops, one on chromatographic theory, calibration science, and quantitative best practices, another on THC isomers, and the third on psychological safety. We're also going to be hearing from a detective from the narcotics unit from the Richmond Police Department and getting a behind the scenes tour of the Virginia Supreme Court. We've also had some instrumentation changes I just wanted to make you aware of. As you just heard, we have a micro XRF, or micro X-ray fluorescence spectrometer. That is a new instrument, and we look forward to applying an ASTM test method, primarily to begin with, to glass. So this is new for us in trace evidence. We have had a replacement SEM-EDS, or scanning electron microscope energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer. This is a different manufacturer than what we've traditionally used, so it's taken some adjustment and getting that online. And trace evidence has also had the removal of LIBS, or laser-induced breakdown spectrometer. We, after a critical instrument failure, chose to not replace that instrument. And this really impacts us with regards to the identification of lithium. Lithium is listed in Article 18.2-248, subsection J, in terms of methamphetamine manufacturing. And given the number of methamphetamine clan labs decreasing and our capability, analytical capability with regards to all the other substances listed in subsection J, we anticipate that that would be a very minimal impact for us. With regards to controlled substances, we've had a replacement DiscovIR, or gas chromatograph solid deposition infrared spectrometer. There was a complete overhaul. While it's the same manufacturer, it's a complete overhaul of the software, and many of the parts have been upgraded as well. So there was some transition in order to get that online for us in controlled substances. We've had some Board of Pharmacy expedited scheduling. In January, we recommended 5 compounds, and those compounds became scheduled on September 27th. In April, we recommended 5 compounds, 3 of which were synthetic opioids and 2 compounds expected to have depressant properties. These also became scheduled on September 27th. In July, we recommended 2 compounds. One was a synthetic opioid and one was a cannabinoid agent. Those were considered at the board's September 26th meeting, and they're pending final approval. In the meantime, we were also consulted by the board to give some information regarding their consideration of placing the substance tianeptine into Schedule 1. And that compound was also considered at the board's September 26th meeting. In May, the drugs submitted to DFS annual report for calendar year 2022 was published. In this report, we saw that methamphetamine continues to be the most identified controlled substance as compared to all the other options. And we also saw the trend continue with increasing illicit synthetic opioids, while a decrease in heroin and prescription opioids have been seen. The graph at the top shows the illicit synthetic opioids by district, and the graph on the map on the right shows it by court district. Region in the top left and court district on the right side. In July 1st, legislation became effective with regards to the continuing changes in the world of cannabis. We had a change in the definition to tetrahydrocannabinol that includes salts, isomers, and salts of isomers. And the definition for total tetrahydrocannabinol now includes tetrahydrocannabinol and tetrahydrocannabinolic acids, so THCs and THCAs. While these changes to the definitions were made, we also removed tetrahydrocannabinol from Schedule 1.
Thank you. Any
I'm sorry,
questions?
I'm not done. I somehow, for some reason, the presentation got lost. I have to reshare it. I think we're back. Can you confirm that you can see the presentation again? Great, thank you. Okay, so we have changes to the definition of tetrahydrocannabinol to include the isomers, and total THC now includes all of the isomers and their THC acids. So looking at Delta 9, we included all of the most common THC isomers into our semi-quantitative method. That method's been online since December 2020. And so we included the most common THC isomers. So it now includes Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 6A, 10A, Delta 10, along with their THC acids into that method. The subcommittee already reviewed that validation for all of those isomers, but we have been continuing with validations to encompass additional isomers, which you see in the purple circle above, and that is going to include cis Delta 9 and Delta 7 for now. So we anticipate a future subcommittee being needed to review that validation. And all of those get added together then, and with regards to calculation of total THC and still 0.3, greater than 0.3% total THC would equal marijuana. We know this is a complicated topic and continues to change. And so prior to that legislation, we released a policy notice to our customers where we tried to clarify our capabilities, not only for what the material was, whether a plant material, extracts, vape cartridges, et cetera, but also based on the offenses and what we would accept and what we would not accept. And we also announced the ability to outsource for edibles. That contract became awarded. So with regards to the edibles, our plan is that DFS will do the initial qualitative testing and report the cannabinoids present, if there are any present, and then make contact with our customers to determine if any additional analysis is needed and discuss the disposition of the evidence. If it is suitable for testing and that testing is needed, DFS will then send the evidence to NMS laboratories to quantitate the THC concentration. We're going to continue to evaluate whether we need to develop an in-house method for THC concentration in edibles, but we were excited to hear, as Dr. Wagner already informed you, that the 2022 to 2024 biennial budget included one laboratory specialist position that would enable agency response to THC legislation. So should we choose to move forward with an in-house method for edibles, we'll be able to use the resources in research section rather than tap the examiners that are working on the bench. I think that is all for me. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, Brad Jenkins. I am the Forensic Biology Program Manager, and we are clearly the most fun section to work in because we always have great things going on. So staffing wise, we have had some examiners who have gone off to better things. Some have been promoted. And so central is we have 6 folks in training. We have one in MIDO, we have 2 in casework, and we have 3 in the DNA data bank. Jenny Grubb is our DNA data bank supervisor. That section has 6 total scientists in it working, so half her staff are in training. So she and the others are very busy keeping us current with arrestee and convicted offender testing and getting those samples into the data bank. The Northern Lab, we'll go to the Northern Lab next. We have 2 examiners in training. One of them is relatively new. He's been here for a couple of months. And the second one, they'll be having their mock trial. We're scheduling that for November. And in the Western Lab, we have 1 person, 1 examiner in training. She just arrived this month, and she is a trainee, so it'll be probably 10 to 12 months before we get her ready for her mock trial. And the Eastern Lab, for a number of updates now, they have been fully staffed down in Eastern, and they continue to be fully staffed down in the Norfolk Lab. Linda spoke about this, Director Jackson spoke about this earlier. We have 2 levels of scientists in the section. We have an examiner level that can do basically all of the analysis and the complex mixture interpretations and complex mixture statistics. And we have a relatively new position that we've termed a biologist. And so the biologist will actually screen evidence for biological fluids. They work a lot of physical evidence recovery kits where they're looking for male DNA. And so we had the idea that we're going to start a physical evidence recovery kit testing unit here in Richmond. So the idea is that we're going to start this unit with 2 biologists, and then we're going to ask for additional biologists for the 2024 budget. And then all of the labs would send their physical evidence recovery kits or their rate kits. They would send them here to the Richmond lab to be processed, that first round of processing. We have about 1,700 rate kits a year that are submitted. And so we expect those to come here. These positions will do your basic male screening. We do very few sperm searches with microscopy anymore. They can generate their STR profiles. If it's a case that doesn't have a suspect, they can enter these profiles in the CODIS and search them. They can issue basic reports, but the complex cases, if it's a mixture that needs probabilistic genotyping, if we need to do additional clothing testing, or we need to do YSTRs, those physical evidence recovery kits will go back to the laboratory that they originated from for that more complex testing and those complex reports. And again, we believe that we can handle the state PERC backlog of 1,700 a year with 5 of these positions. And so that is what we are shooting for. Something that we've not tried this before. Many of the private laboratories now that are testing physical evidence recovery kits have a similar workflow. So we're just kind of building off of that. We have 2, our staff internal training. We completed the STAR mix, or that's probabilistic genotyping. It's a fancy software. We finished that training on a large group of examiners. We have 2 examiners in training for TrueAllele. And up in Northern Virginia, we had one of our, we've had some turnover of staff up there. And so we owe them some relationships training to get them fully up to speed. I believe they have 1 person trained in relationship training. And those cases come here to be tech reviewed currently. We had an outstanding DNA meeting up in Fairfax. And so every year we try to move these meetings around the state. And this is our first in-person meeting that we've had since the pandemic. So we had over 60 staff members attend. And we had 2.5 days of presentations from different scientists around the country. And it's really great to see everybody interact with everybody up there. Big thank you to Pete for sending in one of his speakers from NIST. She did a wonderful job. And one of our past scientific advisory committee members, Kristen Schelling, sent one of her staffers down from Maryland. So big thank you to Kristen for that. Next year, I'm not sure where we'll be meeting next year. It'll be about this time of year next year. It's either going to be here in the Richmond area or down in the Norfolk area, but we haven't decided yet. Validation update. We are still replacing our, let me back up for a second. We have our real-time instruments, the Quant Studio 5s that we're using, and the PowerQuant kit it's a DNA kit from Promega. We are doing we did our final performance checks in the regional labs where we had to run some additional samples. And we're putting this in the manual and coming up with some competencies for the staff to use. And they'll be implementing this. It'll probably be an October, November implementation. Our scientific subcommittee is very busy with the review of the serology cases, so we'll make this validation available at our next meeting. We are still working on the new thermocycler replacements. And so what we have found is we have ordered thermocyclers, but once we get them here, they have failed QC. There's an internal QC and a temperature check that we have done on these. And out of 10, we had to return 3 back to the manufacturer to get them replaced. And so we have 3 more instruments coming, replacing those and QCing those to make sure that they are working properly. The thermocyclers, the preliminary data, the thermocyclers are behaving very similar to our thermocyclers that we're replacing. And so it does not look like this will affect our StarMix settings, but we are confirming that. StarMix is a software that's used, and it's based largely on a lot of laboratory settings specific for the lab. And so if you change things upstream of that, many times that results in changing your StarMix settings. So we're happy to see that they are holding true with the new thermocyclers currently. The last thing on the list is that we are evaluating some new YSTR kits. We haven't moved that into any validation mode yet, but that will be coming. Direct amplification is kind of taking a back seat, but we have finished up most of our validation work on that. I had hoped to roll that out this year, but it's probably going to push to early of 2024. The thermocyclers have taken up some more time than we thought, but this is almost ready to go, and we're making good progress with the other validation projects on the previous page. We continue to outsource sexual assault kits. This is a partnership with the Office of the Attorney General. It's under the SAKI grant. And this was a slide from our previous meeting. And these are prior to CODIS. So for us, this is 1997. And from 1997 to 2016, we allowed attorneys and law enforcement to terminate analysis of those kits. And we're going back and revisiting those kits. In 2016 is when the Virginia legislation was passed that mandated testing of most kits. And so that terminated kit policy has greatly diminished. But we're still seeing a number of the older kits prior to 1997. Those are some RFLP cases, and we are having those tested at a private lab down in Florida. There's about 600 of these kits in this process, and I think we're about 50% or 3/4 of the way through it, sometime around that area. So we'll continue this probably for the next 6 months or so. I think that's it for me. It is. Perfect. Any questions from the group? Great. Thank you very much.
Hello, I am Sabrina Silson. I'm the Physical Evidence Program Manager, so I'll update you on my awesome solutions. I have many latent prints and impressions staffing. We are still training in impressions, so that's shoe and tire impressions. We have one in Central. He should be done by the end of the year. And our one in Western should be done by next summer, so we'll have more capacity for shoe and tire impression analysis across the state. Our latent print, don't have anybody in latent print, as Linda alluded to. We've remained pretty stable in that, thank goodness. So we had a great section meeting this year. We took all 22 examiners to Maryland to go to the International Association for Identification Conference. This is a great conference. They put on many, many lectures, 45-minute lectures. They're not just the 15-minute ones. They also have many workshops that our staff attended. So we were able to spread out and cover a lot of content at the conference. So we're going to actually have a teach back in November from all the examiners. Are going to kind of present one slide of what they took away in case they were in a lecture that somebody else wasn't. But these are a few of the lectures that the staff was able to stay and watch. And I was able to attend too, and it was a great meeting, great conference. We're upgrading our APHIS system. Well, our Virginia State Police is upgrading the APHIS system. They own the system. We use it to analyze latent prints through it, to enter latent prints from crime scenes. So they're in the process of updating it to a more cloud version with NEC, and we're running into delays due to reconfiguring communication networks on the state police side and our side as well. So we're kind of in a holding pattern on that right now. We did do a change with our latent print report wording. We presented this to a working group of our stakeholders, and they kind of liked the idea. So we put a table in the latent print report. So we have the comparison results at the beginning of the report. So we felt that was the most important information to the examiner, to the investigator. So we wanted that up front. So this is what our chart looks like at the front of the report. To just list identifications, exclusions, and inconclusives. And then we get into the body of the report with all the other criteria and information that's relevant as well. The firearms group kind of likes this approach. They want to simplify the report, not simplify according to ANAB, but just simplify as less words on a report. Firearms people don't like the charts, I've learned, so we're going to go with something a little bit different for them. And speaking of firearms, they are not my staffing stable group. We've had a lot of turnover. We struggle getting people through that 2-year training program. So right now we have one in recruit in Central and one in Eastern. I think we just made an offer to a Central person, or we're getting about to. We're trying a new approach for training. So we have 2 people in training in Eastern, 1 in Central, and 1 in Western. And we have 1 training coordinator handling them all. And she is out in the Eastern lab. She's become quite proficient in this Teams model. She has meetings with the trainees every day, just a quick check-in, lots of oral sessions. So knock on wood, we're cruising right along. We're doing well. We were able to hire 1 qualified examiner in our Northern lab. So he should be up and running by the end of the year to help them out with doing casework up there. So again, we're still in recruit and training more people though. Our NIBIN system, which we get a lot of cases for the NIBIN system, we still are getting a lot of potential associations, so over 1,000 as of September 29th. We've only confirmed 6 cases thus far, so when we switched to not confirming every hit, that was a big time saver for us, but you can see a majority of our potential associations come out of the Eastern lab and the Central lab. So we still get a lot in the Western, but not as much in the Northern. And we are seeing changes in our NIBIN submissions because several agencies have acquired a NIBIN system. Most systems they're acquiring, they do the entry and the ATF does the correlation and does the reporting and linking of the crimes for them. So we have Virginia State Police just added Culpeper and Salem. And we think that Henrico County will soon be adding one, and they're one of our largest submitters to our Richmond lab, so that could change our submissions of what kinds of cases we're getting. Because we're not getting the function and the NIBIN, we kind of those easy cases, we now are seeing we're getting a lot of more comparison cases. So it's a lot of work for our examiners to do the comparisons after they've linked these crimes through the NIBIN system. Then they come in for comparison, and that's causing a lot of work on that end. So might look like we may have a few less cases, but those cases require more examiner time. Digital multimedia evidence, their staffing, they lost 2 earlier this year, and he quickly replaced them. We had 1 start last month, and the other gentleman is starting at the end of the month. So they're training them, he's going to train them both up in mobile device analysis first, because that's the majority of their casework. And then one examiner will be trained in video so that we have a little more depth in that program, and the other gentleman will be trained in computers. And they kind of tried a new way of providing results to two of our users, Henrico PD and Stafford Sheriff's Office. They provide extractions from mobile devices. So these are agencies that have their own digital examiners that can go through all of that data and find what they're looking for, but they don't have the means to extract it off the device. So they send the device to us. We use our special tools, crack the device, get the data off of it. We're able to share that in the SharePoint, so electronically. The investigator can look through it and decide what they need. Do they need additional information? Do they not? And it gets that content to them weeks faster so they can go and investigate than our traditional means. We do follow up and send them a disk and a written report, but this gets that extraction in their hands so they can start working it much quicker. And that is all I have. Does anybody have any questions? Last but not least, Dr. Hutchins.
I'm sorry, I have one question, if I could.
Yes?
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry. I'm just curious, have you encountered any challenges with your firearms cases in the evidence being admitted?
We've had some Daubert style hearings, I know, out in Norfolk, and we had, I don't think it was a Daubert hearing, but there were some challenges up in our northern lab. I don't think there's been any successful, well, we have had limited testimony or limited admissibility of the conclusions.
Okay.
So no more saying, to exclusion of all others, or it was identified to this firearm. So we have some limited testimony, but not limiting the evidence coming in, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
If Amy's on here, she can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering.
No, that's correct. I think probably just limiting the testimony to be more in line with the U.S. DOJ alters. And we've had one in Norfolk with that type, or one in Northern with that type of limitation. And then Daubert hearings in the western part of the district and the eastern part, but nothing, the evidence was still permitted in, just some limitations on language use. That is where we are with that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Good morning. Jim Hutchins. I'm in the toxicology program, which includes toxicology and breath alcohol. First, focusing on toxicology, some new methodology that was touched on by Dr. LeBeau and Dr. Wagner. We have the new cannabinoid quantitation and confirmation methodology that should really help us with the issue with the isomers. We also added qualitative screening for xylazine for our base screen method. Some of the projects we have in progress are looking at screening for nitazines using our time of flight mass spectrometer, looking at adding xylazine and dexmedetomidine quantitation, and also adding 3 new compounds to our miscellaneous base drug quantitation to give us some extra capabilities there. Staffing wise, as the director touched on, we do have some vacancies in our toxicology section. We have a forensic toxicologist in our central lab and our western lab that were from the general funds that we still just have not been able to fill. Our eastern laboratory has no vacancies because we had a toxicologist move from our central lab to our eastern lab. And our northern lab is trying to fill in 2 forensic lab specialists, 1 toxicologist, which was due to one of our toxicologists leaving, and 1 forensic scientist. In our breath alcohol section, we're actually fully staffed, but one of those staff is a trainee currently. And in our trainees in our toxicology section, we have a forensic toxicologist in our central and our northern lab, currently in training. Western lab, we have 3 forensic scientists in training, and our eastern, we have 2 forensic scientists. We're hoping that the 2 forensic scientists in the eastern lab should be finished up by the end of the year. Some grants that we have received, we've been awarded from the DMV Highway Safety Office grant for our breath alcohol. This one is the one that allows us to continue offering the licensing and training for our breath alcohol instrument operators, and we retain 1 forensic scientist in that section. It also allows us to maintain our mobile access and electronic processes in our lab. We also have 1 for our toxicology section. which allows us to retain 2 part-time FLSs and also retain and hire 6 FLSs across the state. That just helps with our timeliness of our reports to the medical examiner, which is of concern to the Highway Safety Office for fatal and injured alcohol impaired driving cases. Looking at some of the statistics, and this we wanted to kind of update to show you the changing in our process from January 1, how we are now testing THC on what would used to be considered just high alcohol cases, the DUI category. As of January 1, we now screen those for cannabinoids. And so looking at sort of the case breakdown up through, I can't see the date that I chose to do that, Sabrina. Okay, June 2023, so the first half of the year. Just looking at caseload data. With the medical examiner, of course, we still have outsourcing, so that could be impacting the case numbers there. But looking at the DUID and the DUI plus THC cases, we're projected to be on track, if not a little bit higher than the previous years. Some other, again, reiterating the toxicology testing changes. We have the new methodologies. We're going to be able to quantitate specifically delta-9 THC, delta-9 carboxy, and delta-9 hydroxy THC. We can qualitatively identify delta-8 THC and cannabidiol, and we're going to add on some more qualitative screening for other related isomers. And then again, through 2023, looking at some of the cases that are considered in that DUI plus THC category. So those cases have a blood alcohol content that is greater than or equal to 0.10. If you look at those cases, 23% of those cases had a quantifiable THC concentration. And looking at the table down below, you can see some of the numbers for those cases. So looking at the cases that are those what we consider high alcohol cases, your median concentration tends to be lower. Your median and your average concentration tend to be lower than cases with a lower alcohol concentration. But you can see the difference between the median and the average is indicative that there are quite a few cases that we're getting in that have ridiculously high THC concentration. So there's some interesting notes there. And looking more closely at breath alcohol, you can see how there's the reduction in the number of cases, our number of breath alcohol tests over the years. From 2012, there's a rather steep drop off to the mid 2010s. And then obviously 2020 drop off with the pandemic. We started to see it creep back up in 2022. And if we take the, partial way through the year for breath alcohol tests in 2023, this number projects out to be just a little bit higher than in 2022. So either a plateau or maybe creeping back up for us. And then also with the breath alcohol section, we are still in the works to get a new instrument there, where we're now working with the Department of General Services Division of Purchases and Supply to develop bid documentation. And we're still anticipating getting the bid out prior to the year end. That's it for me. Any question? Mark?
Yeah, I do. Thanks very much for that. I want to follow up on a discussion we had. I think it was the last meeting or the meeting before. I like to see that you're adding the THC now to the DUI, DUID cases. But as you know, ASB 120 goes farther than that, wanting there to be routine screening for other CNS depressants, other stimulants, and narcotics. And I take it that's not being done right now. Has that been further discussed? Is there a plan to try to come in compliance with the recommendations in ASB 120 that's specific to drivers, but then we can talk about it with 119, which is specific for postmortem toxicology. We can talk about it with 121, which is specific to drug facilitated sexual assault cases, where they've identified specific drugs that need to be tested for in every case with outs, but the outs are supposed to be the rare occurrences.
Right. So looking at those documents, as far as kind of touch on the postmortem and the sexual assault, first. We're fairly close to being in compliance with most of those targets. I believe there's just a handful from the postmortem that we're maybe not hitting on, but we have those on the docket to add in new methodology for those. As far as the drivers go, that it comes down to, capabilities, like how much extra work is it going to be and what do we need as far as resources and people to be able to take that on without being such a burden on our, workload. And that's something that we're, trying to investigate, but it would require getting a good concept of how many more cases would that require. We had, I believe, and Linda can correct me if I'm wrong, put the information out to, I believe, the secretary at the last time when we were able to gain the staff to make this change, and trying to figure out which way to go. And the proposal that on just a THC at that time was the proposal that was taken up to the General Assembly. Again, looking at what would be needed for that would require probably quite a bit more expense in instrumentation and more people. And so it's just a matter of funding in that regard to get there.
Okay, and I know, as you are aware of, and probably everybody on the toxicology staff is aware, those recommendations were there to start to have a better appreciation of how big of a drug problem we have. And it ties in well with, I think, the stats that Director Jackson showed earlier, but it's what we're missing when we limit our testing to just what somebody thinks might be there. I think your data there showing the crazy high THC values in some cases that probably would have been missed in the past. So it's important. And of course, it's not just the ASB standard that's made that recommendation. It's been a recommendation of other groups as well to expand the testing beyond just the obvious, I guess. My other question, though, is, and some of this comes in from our earlier meeting, but it's toxicology has different laboratories, and in those different laboratories, it appears that different methods are being used that aren't the same across the whole lab system. I'm curious, and this might be more of a question for Director Jackson or others, but are there other disciplines in the system where there are different techniques being used that kind of do the same thing in the satellite labs versus the central lab?
I can say yes for latent prints, that we have a variety of methods available to process the evidence. So an examiner can choose super glue or they can choose black powder. So there is some discretion of different methods.
But are those options available for everyone in all labs, or is it, I'll just make up things, like, is one lab only allowed to do super glue and another one only allowed to do black powder?
We are one lab with 5 doors, so all methods are available to all 4 labs, because the other lab doesn't do latent prints, but there is some level of different methods available for use.
Okay. Yeah, I guess when bringing back to toxicology, has there been a risk assessment done of having essentially looking for the same drugs, but one lab does it by, we'll say, GCMS, and another lab does it by GCMPD or something like that? Has such a risk assessment occurred to try to evaluate whether that's the right decision versus kind of having everybody do the same thing the same way for the same type of case, irrespective of what particular part of the state it's coming from?
So picking on one of our more recent methods that we use is the opioids and cocaine type of method. There are the 2 options for that method that are the liquid extraction or the solid phase extraction. And as far as sort of a risk assessment on that goes, we haven't done a formal risk assessment, but both of those methods were validated in Dr. Wagner's lab. And they've both proven to meet all that criteria very accurately. The other one that is, I think, more of concern on your mind is our base screen methodology. which, you do have a liquid extraction on that and a solid phase extraction option as well. There was, and Linda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were in charge at that time of the program manager. One of our drugs examiners had done a test comparing the two different techniques and what can and cannot be found at that time with each technique or whatever. And I don't recall the exact outcome of that methodology, but more recent updates to it, as you saw with the subcommittee meeting with the xylazine, we are now, as we validate a method for the liquid extraction that was, solid phase extraction was the one that was approved. That one we delineate in our laboratory manual there, saying that this one can only be performed utilizing this methodology versus the liquid extraction. And that's why there's that additional methodology going on to it. So we're trying to offer those two different options and make sure that newer options coming on are validated to that standard.
The thing that he mentioned back in the day when I was the chemistry program manager, there was at the back of our toxicology manual, it's the whole list of, drugs, and says, what method it is that can be used to analyze those. And there were a lot of drugs that were listed as being appropriate for that base screen method, but I didn't have a lot of understanding about how they had come to that list. And so I had a drugs examiner just make up a bunch of mixes that we spiked into challenge samples and sent those out to all of the labs. And some compounds were taken off the list at that time based on the results of that. And the compounds that stayed on were appropriately identified, by both methods, if that makes sense. So that was something, that was back in like 2009 or something. So that has been a while since that was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the biggest concern really, if you think about it, is detection limits. What's your limited detection if you use one technique versus another? Are you getting comparable detection limits? Or is it literally, a case of, hey, the drug in my system is going to be missed if it goes to this lab, but I'm going to be caught if it goes on this other lab. And that would be perhaps the biggest concern.
Right. That's something we can re-look at that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
I think I would just like to add on to that. So when Dr. LeBeau asked if there's other sections that might have this issue, I mean, if Director Jackson, you could maybe look into that too. If there's other, I think we heard that possibly the latent print section might have some different methodologies in different labs. I think it might be nice if we could just have a summary of that at the next meeting or whenever, I don't know how long it'll take to put that together, but in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for anyone that just reported? Thank you all for those reports. Very good. All right, I don't see any questions, any hands up. Does anyone have any new business that they would like to bring up at this time? Okay, again, I don't see any. Speak up if you do. The next item on the agenda is any public comment. If there are any members of the public who would like to provide comment at this time, please raise your hand if you can in the meeting.
So there is no one in the attendee list that is not an employee of the department.
Okay, that makes it simple. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is selection of the 2023 meeting dates. And so I would ask Ms. Strobel if she can help us by providing some suggested dates for those meetings, and then we can determine if the members can make those times.
Yes, certainly. So currently the proposed dates for 2024 are Tuesday, April the 9th, which would be an in-person meeting. And then in October, Tuesday, the 8th. which could possibly be virtual.
Okay, I guess we'll take the April meeting first. Is there anyone that has a concern with meeting in person on Tuesday, April 9th? All right, I don't hear any, so I think that in-person meeting on Tuesday, April 9th will stand. And I would propose for the October meeting, unless anyone, please speak up if you have a concern, but I would propose to do it remotely as we have this meeting. I think it's helpful for all of us to have to travel just once a year rather than twice. Would Tuesday, October 8th as a remote meeting work for everyone? And please let me know if it does not. Or if anyone would prefer an in-person meeting. Okay, it sounds like Tuesday, October 8th remote meeting works. I think that's all. So for the meeting dates, is that correct? Anybody have any questions? Okay. I think that concludes our agenda. Unless anyone has anything else they want to bring up, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second. Second. All right, thank you. With all in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, the motion passes. The meeting is adjourned, and I thank everyone, including staff and committee members, for being here today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
It's nice to see you all.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.